The night she told me she was pregnant, I should have felt joy. I should have smiled, wrapped her in my arms, whispered that everything would be okay. But instead, my throat went dry, and the room began to shrink around me. Because deep down, I knew the child she was carrying might not be mine. If you've ever felt the weight of a truth you couldn't say out loud, stay with me. Stories like this remind us that love isn't always pure, and silence can destroy more than words ever could. Subscribe, because every hidden truth deserves to be heard. She used to say that I made things look too perfect, that my obsession with clean lines and balance bled into everything, even the way I loved her. I thought it was a compliment back then, the kind that meant she admired me. But now I know what she meant. She was warning me that she was chaos, and that sooner or later, I would try to rebuild her into something she never was. I met her when the city was covered in scaffolding. New towers were rising everywhere, and I was part of a firm designing half of them. She was the lead interior designer on a project I was managing, a fire hidden behind soft eyes. We spent late nights arguing over materials, textures, and layouts, but beneath every disagreement was a current neither of us wanted to acknowledge. The kind that hums quietly until it becomes a storm. When we finally crossed that invisible line between professionalism and something deeper, it wasn't fireworks. It was quiet, like an old wound reopening. Her touch felt familiar, like I had known her in another life. The night we first kissed, she smelled like paint thinner and rain. I remember thinking how human that was, how imperfectly real. We married within a year. Everyone said we moved too fast, but I believed that some things didn't need time to prove themselves, that love could be designed, drawn, measured, and built if the foundation was honest. For a while, I was right. Mornings with her were sunlight and silence. She'd sit on the counter while I brewed coffee, humming under her breath, tracing her fingers over my blueprints as if she could see the future in them. But somewhere between the routines and deadlines, the warmth began to fade. I couldn't pinpoint when exactly. Maybe the night she came home late from a client dinner, her hair smelling faintly of someone else's cologne. Or maybe it started with me, with the way I buried myself in work, convincing myself I was doing it for us. I told myself that providing was love, that stability was romance, that she would understand. She did at first, but love doesn't thrive in logic. It needs attention, mystery, touch. I forgot that. And in the spaces I left empty, something else grew. Curiosity, distance, and eventually, resentment. I remember the first time I felt it. That subtle disconnection. We were at dinner, and she laughed at a message on her phone. It was just a sound, but it was one I hadn't heard in months. I asked what was funny, and she said, "Nothing, just work." Her eyes stayed on the screen longer than they stayed on me. I smiled, pretended not to notice, but the food turned to ash in my mouth. From that night on, I began to feel like an intruder in my own home. Her world became smaller, tighter, filled with conversations that didn't include me. I'd wake up to the sound of her typing, whispering into her phone in the hallway. She said it was for a client in another time zone. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But architects don't live on faith. We live on proof. One evening, I came home early. Something told me to. Her car was in the driveway, lights on in the living room. Through the window, I saw her sitting close to someone. A man I didn't recognize. Their heads bent close together, faces lit by the glow of her laptop. It could have been innocent. It should have been innocent, but the air between them felt too intimate, too practiced. When his hand brushed hers, she didn't pull away. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I drove around the city until dawn, past construction sites, empty streets, bridges lit by cold, fluorescent lights. I told myself I was imagining it, that people touch, laugh, sit close, that I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. I had seen enough unfinished buildings to recognize when something wasn't stable. When I got home, She was asleep on the couch, her phone resting on her chest. I stood there for a long time watching her breathe. I wanted to wake her, to ask her everything, but fear rooted me in place. Fear that she'd tell me the truth. Fear that she wouldn't. The next morning, she kissed my cheek and said, "You look tired." I smiled. She didn't notice my hands trembling as I picked up my coffee. She didn't notice that I'd stopped adding sugar. She was the only reason I ever did. That day, I went to the office and stared at a blank page for hours. The blueprint I was supposed to draft stayed untouched, and in the stillness, I realized something. Every structure I had ever built followed a rule. Load must meet support, or it all collapses. I had carried the weight alone for too long, assuming love was strong enough to hold itself up. But love, like architecture, needs maintenance. And I had let ours decay in silence. That night, when she came home, she brought me a gift, a new sketchbook. "For your next big idea," she said, smiling. I thanked her, kissed her forehead, and tucked it away. I didn't have the heart to tell her I already knew what my next project was, finding out the truth about the woman I thought I'd built forever with. And as I lay in bed beside her pretending to sleep, I realized something else. Structures don't fall in storms. They fall in silence, long before the first drop of rain ever hits the roof. It was the rain that told me to follow her. That night, it came down in thin, slanted sheets against the glass, a whisper, a warning. She said she had to stay late for a client presentation. Her tone was calm, steady, but too precise, as if she'd rehearsed it. I nodded, kissed her goodbye, and watched her drive away. I waited a few minutes before I grabbed my coat and keys. I didn't plan to follow. I just didn't plan to do nothing. The city was half drowned, headlights smeared across wet asphalt like ghosts passing each other. I trailed her car from a distance, counting traffic lights to keep myself calm. She turned off near the old district, where the streets narrowed and the air smelled like rain-soaked brick. My chest tightened when she parked outside a small cafe I didn't recognize, the kind of place that stays open late but never asks why. I pulled over across the street, engine running, wipers cutting through the blur. She waited in her car, checking her phone. Then a man approached, tall, dark jacket, umbrella in hand. She smiled when she saw him. That smile was the thing that broke me. It was the kind of smile that used to be mine, the one she didn't even know she gave when she felt safe. He leaned down, said something, and she laughed. Softly, shyly. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. They went inside. I stayed. The rain drummed against the roof, steady and cruel, as minutes turned to hours. I told myself I'd only watch until I knew for sure. But knowing doesn't always bring clarity. It just opens wounds that never close. When she finally came home that night, her hair was damp, her cheeks flushed. She smelled like rain and guilt. She slipped out of her shoes, smiled at me, and said, "You're still awake?" I nodded. She kissed my forehead, whispered that she was tired, and disappeared into the shower. The sound of the water drowned out my silence. I sat there, watching her phone light up on the counter. I didn't touch it. Not because I trusted her, but because I was afraid. Afraid that proof would make me the villain, the man who destroyed his own illusion. The days that followed blurred together. She grew softer, kinder even, as if she sensed the shift in me. She cooked dinner, asked about my projects, laughed at my dry jokes. But everything she did felt rehearsed, like a performance for an audience of one. I wanted to believe it. I tried to. But once suspicion roots itself, it grows through everything. Then came the night everything changed. She came home earlier than usual, eyes bright, voice trembling with excitement. "I have good news," she said, breathless. I looked up from my desk. Her hands were shaking, and for a moment I thought she was about to confess. Instead, she said, I'm pregnant." The words hit like thunder in a silent room. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her as the walls closed in. She smiled through tears, waiting for me to react. So I did what any husband would do. I smiled. I stood up. I held her. I told her I was happy. That this was the best news I'd ever heard. My voice didn't tremble, but my soul did. She cried against my chest, whispering how scared she was, how much she loved me. I told her everything would be fine. My hand rested on her back, but my eyes were fixed on the window behind her, where the reflection showed a man pretending not to be breaking. That night, after she fell asleep, I went into the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My face looked unfamiliar, pale, hollow, older. I pressed my palms against the sink until the veins in my arms pulsed with heat. There are moments in life when silence feels heavier than words. That was one of them. The next few weeks passed in slow motion. She started buying baby clothes, reading books, humming again. Our house filled with hope, or something pretending to be it. Friends congratulated us. My parents cried with joy over the phone. Every congratulations felt like a nail driven into me. I laughed, smiled, said all the right things, because that's what good men do. They endure. But the mind doesn't rest. It chews on doubt until it becomes hungry. I started noticing small things, the way she'd turn her phone screen away, the quiet tone when she said goodnight, the secretive softness in her eyes that wasn't for me. And then the guilt hit me in waves. Maybe it was mine. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe my paranoia was poisoning everything. One night, unable to bear it, I asked, "Do you ever think about us? The way we were?" She looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Every day," she said. But her eyes flickered. I caught it. That half-second hesitation that tells you everything words can't. After she went to bed, I sat in the nursery we hadn't even started building yet. The room was empty except for a single folded baby blanket she'd bought. I held it, felt the softness, and imagined the tiny heartbeat that was either my redemption or my punishment. I didn't know which terrified me more. When I finally turned off the light, I realized something. This house, this marriage, this life I'd built, wasn't falling apart. It already had. I was just now noticing the dust. There's a silence that settles in a house when trust has left it. It's not loud, not violent. It's something gentler, crueler. It lingers in the corners, under door frames, in the way two people avoid each other's eyes even while smiling. That's what our home became after she told me she was pregnant. Every laugh felt hollow, every touch rehearsed. I began to feel like I was watching someone else's life play out through a window I couldn't break. The nursery became her favorite place. She'd spend hours in there, rearranging things, humming to herself, her body changing as the weeks went by. I would stand by the door sometimes, pretending to admire her. But really, I was studying her. Every gesture, every breath, searching for something to hold on to. She'd catch me watching, smile, and say, "You're going to be a great father." I'd nod, swallow hard, and hope the truth didn't show in my eyes. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. At work, I tried to lose myself in blueprints and models, but even the clean geometry mocked me. Straight lines, perfect measurements, all the things that made sense on paper but never in love. My colleague Daniel noticed the change in me. "You look like you're trying to solve a problem that can't be drawn," he said one afternoon. I laughed it off, but he was right. Love had become the project I couldn't fix, no matter how many drafts I sketched in my mind. One evening, as I was sanding down a model in my studio, I heard her phone buzz in the next room. It was late. She was in the shower. I shouldn't have looked. But temptation doesn't knock. It whispers. I glanced at the screen. A single message, no name. Just, "I miss you too." My body went still. The sound of the shower faded, replaced by the pounding of my heart. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There always is if you're desperate enough to invent one. I sat there staring at the phone until the message disappeared into the lock screen again. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, smiling, asking if I wanted tea, I just nodded. I couldn't speak. My throat felt lined with glass. That night, I lay beside her, listening to her breathing, wondering if it was real. The warmth between us was gone, replaced by a tension so fragile I was afraid to move. She turned in her sleep and rested her hand on my chest. For a second, I almost cried. Not because of her touch, but because it reminded me of what I'd already lost. The next day, I went to the clinic with her for a checkup. The doctor smiled, said everything looked healthy, said the heartbeat was strong. When the sound filled the room, that tiny rhythmic flutter, my eyes burned. It was beautiful, terrifying. I wanted it to be mine. I wanted something in my life to be pure again. I held her hand and said, "He sounds strong." She squeezed back. "Just like his father," she said. And that was the moment I realized, even lies can sound holy when spoken with love. Weeks passed. Her belly grew, her laughter returned, and for a while I let myself drown in the illusion. I told myself that forgiveness could be quiet, that maybe I didn't need to know everything, that some truths could stay buried if it meant saving what was left. But doubt is patient. It waits. One evening I came home early. She didn't hear me come in. I stood in the hallway listening. Her voice was soft, tender. "I can't talk long," she said. A pause, then a low chuckle. "You'll see him soon." My vision blurred. The walls around me bent and pulsed, the air thick with something I couldn't breathe through. I took one step forward, the floor creaking beneath me. She turned, startled, her phone slipping from her hand. "Who was that?" I asked. My voice was calm. Too calm. She blinked, hesitated, then said, "Just work." They were checking on the design plans. I nodded slowly. "You were laughing." It was nothing. Silence stretched between us, long and sharp. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the rain starting again outside. She bent down to pick up her phone, but I reached it first. She froze. Our eyes met, hers wide with panic, mine already gone. "I said it was nothing," she whispered. "Then why are you afraid?" She didn't answer. She just turned away, one hand resting on her stomach as if shielding the life inside from me, or from herself. I left the house that night. Drove without destination. The city blurred past. Neon lights, puddles, faces of strangers I envied for not knowing what I knew. I ended up by the river, parked beneath a bridge, staring at the water until dawn. That's when I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was hollow. Betrayal burns at first, but then it cools into something worse. Resignation. When I got home the next morning, she was waiting at the table, eyes swollen. She didn't ask where I'd been. I didn't ask who he was. We just sat there, pretending to be people who hadn't already said goodbye. The following weeks were a performance, 2 actors playing the same scene until the curtain finally falls. Baby showers, photographs, smiles that hurt to hold. Friends said we looked happier than ever. Maybe that's what makes tragedy beautiful, how easily it wears a mask. And yet, beneath it all, something unexpected began to stir. Not forgiveness, not trust, and something quieter. A strange tenderness. Every time I saw her touch her belly, every time she winced with fatigue or smiled at a kick, a thought echoed in me. That child didn't ask for any of this. Maybe love can't be rebuilt, but compassion can. And sometimes that's all that's left when everything else collapses. The rain came back the night she went into labor. It always did. As if the sky itself refused to let our story end without its quiet mourning. The hospital lights were harsh, fluorescent, sterile. Everything about that night felt distant and too bright, like I was walking through someone else's memory. She gripped my hand so tight her nails left crescent moons in my skin, her face pale, her breath jagged. I whispered that it was going to be okay. I didn't know if I meant it. Hours passed in fragments. The rhythm of her breathing, the steady beeping of the monitor, the nurses moving like ghosts around us. When the cry finally came, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't joy or relief. It was something deeper, raw, primal. The sound of life forcing its way through brokenness. The nurse handed me the baby, small and trembling in my arms. His eyes were closed, his skin impossibly soft. I felt the weight of him, and for a moment, everything went still. He was perfect. Completely innocent. Completely undeserving of the storm that had made him. And in that moment, I didn't care about biology, about the truth I'd been running from. I only knew that he was here. That somehow, despite everything, something good had found its way into the wreckage. She looked up at me from the bed, her eyes glassy and tired. "He's beautiful, isn't he?" she whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. I wanted to say yes. He's beautiful. He's mine, even if he isn't. But the words tangled in my throat. I laid him gently beside her, watched her trace his tiny fingers, and I realized that love, in its purest form, doesn't need certainty. It only needs presence. For a while, we were quiet. The rain outside softened into a hush, the kind that comes after confession. I thought maybe this was our chance to start over. Maybe this child could be the bridge back to what we once were. But life doesn't rebuild so easily. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a paternity test. I don't know who sent it. I didn't need to. My hand shook as I unfolded it. The result was there, cold and final, a few printed words that dismantled everything I'd tried to hold together. I didn't confront her right away. For 3 days, I carried that paper folded in my wallet like a secret scar. Every time she smiled, every time she held the baby, I felt the ground tilt beneath me. On the 4th day, I couldn't take it anymore. We were in the living room. She was humming softly, rocking him to sleep. I stood by the window, rain streaking the glass again. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "I got a letter," she looked up. "From who?" I didn't answer. I just placed the paper on the coffee table. She glanced at it, and I saw the moment her face changed, the color draining, her body freezing mid-motion. She whispered, "Please don't." "Don't what?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Don't see the truth?" Tears filled her eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Then how was it supposed to happen?" I said. "You lie? I raise another man's child and we pretend it's fine?" Her shoulders collapsed. She sank to the floor, clutching the baby close. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't even know for sure until now," I finished. The baby stirred, began to cry. The sound pierced through me. I turned away, pressing my hand to my face. There are no right words in moments like that, only the unbearable quiet of realization. She begged me to stay. Said she loved me, said she made a mistake. I believed her. I think I always had. But believing doesn't mean forgiving. Some fractures can't be repaired. They just become part of the structure, forever visible, forever fragile. That night, I packed a bag. Just a few clothes, my sketchbook, the watch she'd given me years ago. She stood in the doorway, the baby asleep against her shoulder, her tears glinting under the hallway light. "Please," she whispered. "Don't go." I paused, my hand on the doorknob. I wanted to turn back, to say we could start over, to say that love was enough. But the truth is, I didn't recognize myself anymore. I had become someone who measured love by silence, who stayed out of duty instead of desire. I looked at her one last time and said, "Take care of him." When the door closed behind me, the world felt too big, too quiet. The rain hit my face, cold and familiar. I walked to my car and sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, breathing in the scent of wet air and endings. Weeks turned into months. I moved into a small apartment near the river, the same one where I used to sit when I couldn't face the truth. I went back to work, buried myself in designs, in creating things that wouldn't betray me. But even then, in the clean geometry of my sketches, I saw her face, his tiny hands. Every building I drew felt like a prayer for stability I no longer believed in. Sometimes, Late at night, I drive past our old house. The lights are always on. I imagine her singing to him, imagine him growing, learning to laugh, to speak, to walk. I don't know if he'll ever know me. I don't know if I want him to. But I do know this, I don't hate them. Not her, not him. The anger faded long ago, washed away by something quieter, understanding. Because in the end, love isn't about possession. It's about the marks it leaves, the invisible blueprints we carry long after the walls have fallen, and sometimes the most merciful thing you can do for a broken structure is to walk away before it collapses on you.